reading from the book of Proverbs. When one finds a worthy wife, her value is far beyond pearls. Her husband, entrusting his heart to her, has an unfailing prize. She brings him good and not evil all the days of her life. She obtains wool and flax and works with loving hands. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her fingers ply the spindle. She reaches out her hands to the poor and extends her arms to the needy. Charm is deceptive and beauty fleeting. The woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her a reward for her labors, and let her works praise her at the city gates. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Thanks be to God.
A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Thessalonians. Concerning times and seasons, brothers and sisters, you have no need for anything to be written to you. For you yourselves know very well that the day of the Lord will come, like a thief at night. When people are saying peace and security, then sudden disaster comes upon them, like labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you, brothers and sisters, are not in the darkness, for that day to overtake you like a thief. For all of you are children of the light and children of the day. We are not of the night or of the darkness. Therefore, let us not sleep as the rest do, but let us stay alert and sober. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus told his disciples this parable. A man going on a journey called in his servants and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to a third 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. After a long time, the master of those servants came back and settled accounts with them. The one who had received 5 talents came forward, bringing an additional 5. He said, "Master, you gave me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more." His master said to him, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since you were faithful in small matters, I will give you greater responsibilities. Come, share your master's joy." The Gospel of the Lord. Okay, as we gear up for Thanksgiving and the 2 issues of turkey and travel sometimes just involves getting to the airport, dropping people off, picking people up, so forth and so on. I want to give you that famous old Thanksgiving aptitude test, okay? 4 questions. The first question, if right now you could walk down to the oven, to the kitchen in the parish hall, and all the ingredients for Thanksgiving dinner were there, like raw ingredients, turkey, breadcrumbs, string beans, apples, potatoes, pie crust stuff, but not made yet. If you, without any lifelines, without calling your mother, your wife, your home ec teacher, none of those things, if you could go down there right now and turn those ingredients into a fine Thanksgiving meal, raise your hand. If you think you could go down there and do that. No big surprises. Okay. Pretty good turnout. Next question. Here's the situation. You've got to get from here to Newark Airport to pick up an in-law. okay? And you decided you're going to go anyhow, okay? But the deal is, you can't go on any interstate. You can't take 78, you can't take the Parkway, you can't take the Turnpike, you can't take 287.
What about you?
And basically, you know what? You can't take 22 either. You can't take 22. Raise your hand if you could figure out how to get there 3 different ways. 3 different ways, no GPS, no maps. You can get from here to the airport to pick up your in-law. No interstates. Raise your hand good and high if you can figure out how to do that.
3 ways.
I'm impressed. I'm impressed. Okay? Good. Thank you. Raise your hand if you can do both of those things. Carol, Jorgen. Okay, we got a couple of very self-confident people here. Megan, Carol, yeah, we got any more back up there. John, you think you can do it? Okay, both of them. Okay, now there's no shame in this. Raise your hand if you can't do either one of those things. Okay, good, good. Excellent. Okay, so as Plato would say, and as St. Paul would affirm it later, wisdom starts with self-knowledge, huh? So what's the point of the Thanksgiving aptitude test? By the way, I can do the directions thing, and when it comes to the food, keep me as far away from the kitchen as you can. I am a really finicky eater. Not. My one goal, keep hunger at bay, okay? My Thanksgiving dinner, way uptown. 4th year in a row. You know where I'm going for Thanksgiving dinner this year because I'm such a fussy eater? Cracker Barrel in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. You have not lived until you've had Cracker Barrel turkey. Why? Because there's a guy I used to coach in Special Olympics sailing, and he and his mom, she's getting up there, and he's going through a little bit of a rough patch, and they kind of got expelled from their family for this really stupid thing. Anyhow, so this is the 4th year in a row. It's an hour for them. It's a little 2.5 or 3 for me, and it's going to be great, okay? But don't ask me to cook the turkey. And by the way, I am Lord Bountiful. I'm treating him again this year. Cracker Barrel, $13.50. Try to beat that. But that question, it's really easy and when it comes to something like cooking a turkey or getting to Newark Airport. And then somehow our defenses go up a little bit more when we ask about other talents that we have or don't have. And St. Paul and Jesus are both asking us, can you be really clear about that? Just be aware of what choices of yours you can really trust and which choices of yours maybe not so much. See, Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, we get to the end of it today. It's chapter 5. It's a very short letter. If you haven't read this thing, read it. It's vintage Paul. Once again, it tells us so much about the early church because it's the first thing that was written. There's nothing that was written earlier than this. It's beautiful. And it gives us Paul at his earliest, most pioneering stage. Anyhow, in chapter 5, Paul now tells the people, listen, you are children of the light. And for those of you who like to notice scripture, study things, it's what you call a chiastic structure. So he says one thing, and then he says another thing, and then he repeats the second thing, and then he repeats the first thing. You are not children of the dark, you are children of the light. You are children of the day, you are not children of the dark. Whatever it is he says in the middle, when you study Paul, that's really big news. The big news in the structure of today's second reading, you are children of the light. In other words, he's very much focused on their practice of charity. If you go back and you read the passage today and what precedes it in chapter 4, Paul is laying all sorts of laurels on the heads of the Thessalonians because they're so charitable to the Macedonians, okay? That they really have done a great job. They know all about mutual charity. And so when he talks about being a child of the light, he knows what's going on when it comes to mutual charity. However, Paul says right before the passage that we get today, listen, when it comes to the way you arrange marriages, you're not doing so hot. What you're still doing is doing what he calls unholy marriages. It sounds like it's some really dirty thing. It's not. What they're doing is arranging marriages that enable the benefits and the inheritance to stay within families. But the way that they do that, it kind of butts up against Christian ideas of marriage and Jewish ideas of marriage. Paul's bottom line, folks, when it comes to how to treat one another in general, trust your judgment. You're really good at this. And he starts off the passage today by saying, you don't need anybody to write to you about this. You're doing just fine. You're doing just fine. You know how to cook the turkey. Don't read the cookbook. You know how to get to the airport. Don't look at the map. Trust your judgments. Except for when it comes to these arranged marriages, you better break out the cookbook and get the GPS all together at the same time, huh? Because on that one, you're not doing so hot. Just realize you got to work on it. Your judgments, not so great. But the other stuff, great. In the gospel today, it's the story of the talents. Now, a talent, as best we can understand, there's always a role for economics when studying Scripture. Easily overlooked. The best that we can understand is a talent is probably the equivalent of about 3 years' pay for a basic laborer, semi-skilled laborer. So, the guy who's got the 5 talents, the lord of the ranch is giving him 15 years' pay. Wow, that's big. The guy with the 1 talent, probably 3 years' pay, but that's still a lot. And so the master of the ranch gives out these talents, these treasures, according to each one's ability. So the guy with the 5 talents, he's a good bet. He's a solid investor. Let's go with him. And the way he's going to make his money is really one of 2 things. He's going to get involved with the money changing at the temple gate, or in another scenario, he's going to buy seed, and the seed is going to pay off, and he's going to have a good harvest. It's all going to be fine. So he's got a lot going for him. Now, the guy with the 1 talent, he's not some sort of a dope. He's got enough. The lord of the ranch is going to give him the equivalent of 3 years' pay. That's a lot. And say, do with this, do something with it. So when I come back, I can get some more moolah. But that guy gives into his fear. He obviously has talents he could have used. But he likes to work when the boss is around. Clearly, he likes to work when the boss is around. He feels safer with that. And then when he's on his own, he's overridden with fear, and he lets his fear determine his choices. And so he goes and buries the treasure in the field, which is, of course, the safest place to do it. You go to some remote field, and you pace off the distance between that fixed landmark and this fixed landmark, and you bury your treasure, and it's safe there, unless, of course, the guy from the gospel who discovers the treasure in the field happens to wander into your story, in which case your goose is severely cooked, right? But other than that, it's safe right where it is. But you see the difference between the 1 talent guy let fear drive his choices, and the 5 talent guy let confidence and faith and his track record drive his choices. Different kind of a version of the same story over here. Maybe when fear is driving our choices, maybe we shouldn't really trust our choices, but when we are letting the more inspired angels steer the bus, yeah, trust it, do it, and know the difference. So you get the message here in both of these readings. It's a question of know what your talents are. You're doing fine when it comes to mutual charity, not so hot with the marriage arrangements. And know when to do it. When fear is driving your choices, don't do it. When faith and the bright angels are steering your choices, trust your choices. And so not a one of us can trust every single choice that comes down the road, but most of us can trust most of our choices most of the time. And maybe the advice today from Paul is to know when you can't trust your own choices. And the story in the gospel, don't trust your choices, for instance, when fear is in control. So I'd ask you to come back. Most of you don't live by yourselves. Most of you are part of family units, right? One way or the other. And it's just as there's a specialization of labor and there's the division of tasks. And so it is, whose wisdom on certain matters can we trust more? But remember this. The inspired choice isn't always the feel-good choice, right? The inspired choice is not always the one that's going to lead us to, something that the world would recognize as serenity. Because the choice that led him to that is the most inspired choice there ever was, and it didn't make him feel good, right? It brought him peace, but it didn't make him feel good, and there's a difference between those 2 things. And so it's about the specialization of choices in the household with that in mind. Not every choice is to be evaluated by does it make us feel good or not. No, it's to be evaluated by does it line up with God's hopes. Let me get really concrete. Different families have different people in the families with different expectations about what's an appropriate amount, say, of family time, right? How much time should we be spending? And my little brother is really onto this now, and so he loaded his family into the boat and went over to way out in the ocean last week up in New England. not last month, I guess it was, and the storm blew in, and they all said, Dad, it's really okay if we don't spend time together on the boat. It's really okay, right? But no, he was determined he was going to make this thing happen because they didn't have enough time together. But in every family, there's that question, and there's usually going to be one person or some who are going to say that, we need more time together, quality time. And then there's going to be someone else who said, everything, we're fine the way we are. Don't relax. This is okay the way it is. Whose choices, and I'm not saying that inherently one is better than the other, but the idea is whose choices are more trustworthy in that? Who has the better track record? Who has the more inspired sense of what God is asking us to do here? I'm not siding with one or the other. The point is, which one in your family seems to be lined up with God's hopes more robustly? Kids, it's a different story, especially if you're in the teenage years, right? You're somewhere between 8th grade and 15th grade, right? So you're big kids, you're young adults, but you're not yet taxpayers. So the idea is obedience to the parents. That's a biblical value. That's something we do. Obedience is it, but sometimes we can disagree. And when is it that you feel that you're really inspired, that your choice is the right choice, even though it's not understood? Sometimes we can trust our choices. Most of the time we can, but sometimes we have to be aware of, I have a blind spot in that area. I have a disordered attachment. I have some fear that's going on. I have some weird thing. And friends, when it comes down to it, there's no more baggage attached to that than saying, I'm good at getting to the airport. I stink at cooking turkeys. But we make a bigger deal over it, right? And it doesn't need to be. So I'd ask you, when has there been a time when you've made the choice that you thought, that doesn't feel right? And you stuck with it, and it wasn't right. What was that feeling? How do you describe it? And you can't just say, I just know. No, you need to get more specific than that. When has there been a time when you made the choice, you drove the bus for the family, for the team, proverbial bus, for the ministry, for the neighborhood, whatever, and you made a choice that influenced people, and you realized, no, that was the wrong one, man. And I knew it at the time. Why didn't I act on it? What was it that enabled you to know that was the wrong choice? And at the same time, the other side of it is, when have you made a choice that was really the right one? It wasn't popular, but it was the right one. It was the inspired one. And you let your confidence build success, and success build confidence. Most of our choices we can trust most of the time, but we also have to recognize, as Paul is telling us and Jesus shows us, not always. Know your limits. Know which choices of yours you can trust and which are better left to others or require more input. Where have you messed it up? And what do you learn from that? You weren't the one to be making that choice, but you did, and it went south. Versus, when have you made a choice, it wasn't entirely popular, but looking back, you can see that lined up with God's hopes. How did you know that as well? Good luck with the turkeys. If you need directions, call me. If I see you at Cracker Barrel, I'm not saying hello. There's one really special exemption I forgot to point out, and that is, and this is really true. I've never been in a parish so much where people were so eager to greet their in-laws. So if you're an in-law who's in from out of town, ignore the wise guy comment before about going to the airport to pick up your in-laws. I've never been in a place where people look forward to their in-laws' visits as much as they do here in Hillsborough. It's really a remarkable thing. I know, we'll write a relationship cookbook and we'll sell it next year. Huh? Don't forget, Mass is Wednesday night at 5 and then Thursday morning at 8:30. The Wednesday at 5, we're just trying it this year. The idea is that I've been advised by people who cook that it's right at about the right time. You've gotten most of your frenzy stuff done, and it's before you have to get into the final push. So the idea is bring a friend. After Mass, we'll have the blessing of food. bring some munchies, bring a bottle of wine. We'll turn on the fireplace if you want to hang out. There might be like one person here. There might be a couple of dozen people here. It's a new thing. Check it out. See if you want to do it. Bring a friend, hang out for an hour after Mass. All good. So it's about knowing which of our choices tend to be inspired and where we have those blind spots or those deaf zones where we can't really pay attention to what God's saying. And so our choices in that area tend not to line up with God's hopes as much as the choices of other people in our orbits. And it's as non-controversial as I know how to drive to the airport and you know how to cook a turkey. So you do your thing, I'll do my thing. So where do you think that you need to double check in on your choices, and you've made a couple that affect people and you think, I don't seem to be getting it right. Right meaning it doesn't line up with God's hopes. Or I've made some of those choices and they're a little bold and they're out there and they didn't make me feel good right away, but I know they were right. How did you know the difference? What seemed to be the talents God's giving you, and which seems to be the talents God's not giving you so much? God bless all of you. Look forward to seeing several of the college students home for Thanksgiving, and whatever you're doing, have a great Thanksgiving. Let us pray.